Well, hello, it is July the 7th, I think, and it's time for another update on my little tank room that I'm building. And I hope you can hear me over the noise of the cooler. The camera's right next to the cooler, so it's probably picking up a lot of that noise. But anyway, as I showed you last time, I have the entire pad poured. The wall is taken out, and I'm working on the first of the two tanks. And the reason I'm making wooden tanks rather than going to buy another plastic tank is because the way this is shaped, I can get a lot more water in a wooden tank that I build myself than I can in a plastic tank. These plastic tanks, well, let me show you over here. Now these plastic tanks over here that you can see that are in the existing old pump room, they work quite well, but these are 500-gallon tanks. They say 550, but in real terms, in practical terms, you get about 500 gallons capacity out of these. They work really well. Now I have limited room in here, as you can see, and I'm going to have more room because this wall eventually is going to be moved out to just about where on the other side of that step ladder. So I'll have more room in there, but I need that for some other things. But with this footprint here, let me show you. This footprint here gives me about roughly 6 by 6, and I'm going to make it about 5 feet high and line it with a pond liner type material. And when you do that, you figure out the capacity. This is well over 1,000 gallons for one tank. So the two tanks here, and you see all the garbage from tearing down this wall behind me. The two tanks here that I'm going to have will have well over 1,000 gallons each, probably something like 2,500 gallons total. What you want is a good solid floor because 1,000 gallons of water weighs probably 7,000 or 8,000 pounds, somewhere in there. So it's very, very heavy. And when you build it out of wood like this, you've got to make sure that, especially around the bottom where it pushes out that way near the bottom, you've got to have a lot of strength there to hold this together. And all I'm going to do is make this out of 2x4s. There's some of them there, and you can see those stack of plywood in the chipboard in the truck. And I'm going to glue them down with liquid nails and screw them down so that they hold. And that way, with the glue and the screws holding them down, it's a lot more strong and a lot more stable. So we'll first step here is to put the plywood down over this and then put the walls up. So we'll get to that here in a little bit and show you the results of that. Okay, now before we get too far in this, I want to show you kind of the plans for how I'm going to build this. Now here you see a picture of those same 2x4s laying on the ground. Now remember, we're looking at it from overhead. Now this next picture shows that we're going to lay plywood down over the top of these 2x4s that are laying on edge on the floor right now. Now you can see the top and bottom of this picture. Remember, we're looking down on it, but on this picture the top and bottom show that the 2x4s have been doubled, and I'm going to actually do that around all four sides so that the walls, when I put them on, will have plenty of material to grip onto so that they'll be strong enough to support the weight and the push outward that the water pressure will give us. Now this picture here shows the plywood having been cut to proper size and laid down on top and fastened properly, of course. And of course all four of the sides on the bottom now have proper framing to show you in the picture. And when you sit that up and look at it from the side view, which is the normal view you'd be looking at, what you get is this picture. Now in this picture, the bottom that we have been looking at is that blue part, and you can see that little arrow that says plywood floor layer. That's what we have been looking at from the overhead, from the top. Now you see there's two walls on it on either side. It's actually going to have four walls, of course, and we're looking at one end that there should be a wall there, but there isn't at the moment. Now you can see what we've got on the inside is a plywood layer and 2x4s on the outside of that to hold that plywood in place to give it structural strength. Now the plywood layer is going to have a plastic liner placed inside of it. Now that plastic liner is what is actually going to hold the water, and it is imperative that that plastic liner doesn't leak, because even though this wood is pretty good, if it's wet long term it's going to come apart. So the wood has to be dry, and it has to stay dry, and that liner can never ever leak, because that'll make the wood weaken and fall apart. So that is the one Achilles heel, if you will, of this type of construction, is you just can't ever let the wood get wet. Now I know some of you have probably seen some construction techniques where perhaps like in building a water tank or something like that, they've used wood and wood only. And it works very well, and they rely on the fact that the wood will swell up once it's set up there, and it'll seal up by itself quite nicely. But if you've noticed, the wood tanks are always circular, and I'm not going to build one that's circular here, a tank that's circular. I just don't have the resources to do that, nor the space. I'm going to build it rectangular, as you see here. And when you do that and use plywood, you can't use that kind of technique, and that's why we can't just build this out of wood and hope the wood seals it up. So in my case, this wood has to stay dry, and it has to stay dry all the time. I guess it can get wet once in a while as long as it dries out pretty fast, and that's the reason for the liners. The liners must not leak, and the minute you notice one leaking, it's got to be drained and replaced.